I'm an outdoor enthusiast, and that includes everything from snowshoeing and cross-country skiing to fishing and hunting. Anything outdoors I love to do. And the time I spend out there has been incredibly meaningful for me because of the wilderness aspect and just the solitude, just being in the woods and being in the wilderness. I went to Luther College when I was an undergraduate, and I took some education courses there. I didn't really like it, but what ended up happening was a professor in the physical education department approached me and said, "Would you be interested in teaching an outdoor education course?" And I said, "Yes, that'd be awesome." So I did it, and I ended up actually attending Luther at the same time that I was teaching at Luther. And I ended up teaching for, I think it was 3 years. And every semester would do one outdoor education course, which included a variety of different, your typical outdoor activities, climbing and caving and skiing and backpacking and rock climbing and all that kind of stuff. Once I taught that course, the first time, even after the first class, I knew immediately this is what I want to do for my life. It took me 8 years to finish my undergraduate degree. My parents didn't have any money, and I wanted to go to college. They were indifferent about it, but they kind of said that'd be probably a good thing to do. So I would go for a year and take a year off to make money and to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so what I ended up figuring out during those 8 years is that I would go to college, and I started out in biology, and I would attend these lectures, and I enjoyed learning about the material, but it was all book learning. So in the summers and then during my time off of college, I would go and experience what I was reading about in my lectures. So for example, I remember sitting in class one day and my professor was talking about timber wolves, the gray wolf. And I read a section in our ecology book. It was an ecology class. And I remember reading about Dave Meach. And so after class, I tracked him down. I tracked down Dave Meach, got his phone number, called him, and I said, "Hey, I just read about you in my ecology book. I would love to come and trap timber wolves for you." And he said, "Well, it just so happens we have an opening. Come on up." So that's what I would do during those off years. But I realized during those years that I wasn't in college how meaningful direct experience was. So working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and another opportunity I had was to work for Outward Bound. Those direct experiences were so incredibly transformational that I knew I needed to get through college, but I knew that I wanted to myself experience things directly, but also if I was going to teach college, I wanted my students to experience things firsthand as well. The reason why I focused on project-based learning is because when I moved to Minnesota and took this position, I was still working a lot with adventure education. And I met an individual who started a school up in Minnesota, or up at Henderson, and it's called Minnesota New Country School. And Doug Thomas invited me up, and I went into the school and I observed what was going on. And it's 100% project-based learning. There's no bells, there's no classrooms like you think of a classroom with, chairs sitting in a row. It was all interactive, and students were 100% working on projects. And I just thought, this is the epitome of experiential learning in a traditional formal classroom. And I thought, this is the way all education should be. So I started working with them, and I started doing my research around their schools. And they have a network of schools. They were funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They got a lot of money to replicate their flagship school called Minnesota New Country School. They replicated the school, and I would go around to these different schools, these EdVisions schools. They created an organization called EdVisions, and I would go to these schools and help them integrate more project-based learning in their curriculums. So the way in which the experiential education program transformed me was it gave me the freedom to pursue my own interests and passions, which was critically important to me. I knew that in order for me to thrive, I could not be in a controlling learning environment. I needed to have freedom to pursue my own interests and passions. A piece of advice for teachers wanting to integrate more experiential learning or project-based into their classrooms is to start slow. And a lot of times what I tell teachers is you take control of the learning environment and you create the projects first so that students get a feel for it and you get a feel for it as an educator. And once the student kind of grasps the format of project-based learning, then open it up for more freedom for the student to create their own projects. They need some guidance. You know, John Dewey is my hero in experiential education, and he would say the same thing. You need to provide students with guidance. You need to help them throughout the entire learning process. So as an educator who's using project-based learning, you can't just hand it to them and say, I'm going to go over here in the corner and read a newspaper. You have to stay with them and guide them throughout the entire process from beginning to end.